Hey, everybody. Hey, Danille.
Hey, everyone. Coming here
How's it
live.
going?
Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm here with Ken.
Hey, guys. We're in two different places, as you guys can see. I'm in Manhattan Beach right now, and Danille's in Arizona.
Yep. So, how's everyone doing out there? It's been a crazy week. Please let us know where you're from. And then, Ken, what did you do this week?
Well, we had a great week. I worked a ton on, I did a video for a doctor's group, and we're in the middle of a hunt on a bunch of new properties we're trying to buy in Texas, and that's been really, really busy. You know, with our, we have an investment management committee call every week with our acquisitions and our COO and my partner, Ross and Leslie. So, we're busy. We're busy trying to find rentals, right? It's just what you guys are experiencing on the single family side of the equation. We're also experiencing on the multifamily side where there'll be 30, 40, 50 bidders on one project. And, then you get down to a best and final, and, that might be 5 people. And then they do another best and final. And each time they're asking you to, sweeten the terms for the seller. And so it's quite a process.
Awesome. We have people coming in from all over. We have Anthony from Ventura County. We have Bill from Queen Creek. Edson from North Dakota. So people are just kind of listening from all over the place. So thanks so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. And ladies, if you could hit the like button, that really helps us out. But today we're going to be talking about what a renter nation would look like. So Ken really feels like we're going into a renter nation, and there's going to be pros and cons to that. So we wanted to kind of discuss that today.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, for those of you that are pretty well traveled, you'll know that the majority of, like, when you go to some of these more expensive areas, like Europe, let's say, or Italy or England or Asia, there's a things are quite expensive, and most of the people rent in a lot of those markets, and it's kind of a lifestyle that has been that way for years and years and years. And so it's been very different in the United States. There's been a lot of focus on home ownership, which has been good. Obviously, that's actually what's going to help people out right now, is having that equity in their homes. As you take a look at the overwhelming majority of people that when they retire, the biggest amount of money that they have is typically from their residential home or equity in their home. Not always, but if you take a look year over year, that's been pretty consistent. So I believe that with this affordability problem that we're having with the single families, and now, people are starting to not be able to buy, and, because interest rates are at all-time lows, and they have been for a while. Actually, they've ticked up a little bit. And the prices of houses, I'm seeing, like I was looking at a report in the Boise market, which is arguably Boise and Austin are two of the hottest housing markets in the country, that, there's 70% of the people that are surveyed in those markets are saying that it's not a good time to buy in those markets. So I think that the end is near on this push of housing prices, because what's going to happen is you're not going to have the bidding wars like you've seen already, and we're already seeing that happen. So I'm going to do a video next week, and I'm going to focus on some of the markets that I think are going to pop first. And I think that we're getting into these affordability problems on the single family side. And what's going to happen is that people are going to have to be forced into rental housing. And that's going to put additional pressure on the rental housing side.
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of go over it for everyone listening, it's harder for people to buy houses because, with inflation cutting into their income, it's harder to get mortgages. It's harder for them to save with housing prices continuing to go up. But Ken, a question for you is, if you see bubbles popping, then do you see more people then being able to buy? And how does that work into being a renter nation?
Well, there's a couple things. There's multiple things happening at once. One is there. If you go back and take a look at the housing that was delivered in the last 20 years, you will see that we've been delivering a shortage of housing. So now it's just simple math. So you got to take a look at the number of housing that's being built, then the number of people that need it. That's it. So you got a supply and demand issue. So that has been driving this increase, in addition to obviously all the other things that we continue to discuss. So there has been from a construction standpoint, a shortage of housing delivered. And if you just look at the people entering, so you can go back and look at your baby boomers, your Gen X, your Gen Ys, and your Gen Zs. The baby boomers were 71 million. The Gen X were 65 million. The Gen Ys, which are basically 25 to 40, which is kind of the renter base now, is 72 million. And the Gen Z is 68 million. Okay, so that's a lot of people entering the markets. And so one of the things I think that we're going to have a problem with is that these Gen Zs are going to really, really have a tough time getting into homes. And so I think that the Gen Z, population of 68 million people, which is right now, that's 1997 to 2012. That's when they were born. But they're 9 years old to 24 years old. Those are the people that are going to go into the rentals, and then they're the ones that are supposed to, go into housing. And of course, in front of that is the Gen Ys, which is 72 million. So that's the category that I'm most concerned about. It's like 140 million people that are anywhere from, say, 40 to 10 years old. And if they sell a home, they're going to have a tough time buying another home in that market, and they're going to capture all that equity as you do. And you're not going to be doing a lateral move. You're probably going to be doing a downward move. So a lot of times with housing, as we know, is people like to kind of ladder up. And I don't think that that's going to happen. And I think people are going to be forced more into rentals.
Yeah, because I mean, I know that my parents kind of did that. Like over time, you buy something and then you sell it and buy something bigger and sell it and buy something bigger. But I have friends in California that sold their house at the kind of start of all this, and now they can't afford to buy. So that their plan was to sell it, and then to maybe move in something bigger, kind of wait for the market to correct. But now they're seeing that if they're going to buy, they're going to have to take on a bigger loan.
Yeah, and there's other factors at play this time around. Everybody usually thinks of the housing market, and I think historically it's been normal folks buying houses, our family, our friends, etc. Now you have some very different components. Now you have people like doing them for Airbnb. You have people doing them for short term, and you even have, people are really talking right now a lot about Blackstone and JP Morgan, capital management, buying, these high expensive houses. I was playing golf this week with a realtor in Manhattan Beach, and he told me that there was one REIT that came in and bought 3 $5+ million homes with renters in them in California in the last few months. And so, I think that you have a lot of people trying to hedge inflation. I think they've discovered that things are not transitory. And so, like the government keeps saying that inflation is transitory. I don't think anybody believes it. So what they're doing is they're buying assets. And so that's competing against people like your folks. Your folks are buying a home to live in. And these people are buying a home for very different reasons. And so, and they're buying it from a business standpoint, or for a hedge of the dollar standpoint with the hedge.
Well, and that's what Mr. Wright's saying over on YouTube. He said, many people are buying real estate just to park money, no intention of living in them, just to hedge against inflation. And Ken, I know that's what you just did when you bought that small rental in Scottsdale.
Yeah. So just to let you guys know, so I had a bunch of cash, and just like you guys, I'm always trying to figure out what to do with it. Whether it's invest in businesses, put it in the stock market, put it in, with a wealth manager or whatever. And so obviously I'm in the real estate business. So I decided when my son and his girlfriend were getting out of college that I was going to buy all cash, no debt, a home in Scottsdale to literally move money from a cash position that was losing, 3, 4, 5%. I don't know what inflation is. There's all kinds of reported numbers on that, and move it into something that might go the other way. And that's already happened. That house has already gone up in value. Not that I was actually buying it for that. I wasn't actually trying to buy it in the hopes that it would go up, because I'm not selling it. I was just literally trying to move money into a hard asset. And of course, it's covered by rent. And I'm going to give my son a deal, of course, but he is still going to pay, by the way. So.
Well, and Mr. Wright said something interesting. He said Boise will be the first to pop. And I know we're not going to chat about that today, but I think you're going to chat about that in your video next week.
Yeah, I agree with them. When you take a look at real estate, you guys have to take a look at, everybody kind of groups the markets together. And so the media and everybody's like, oh, housing prices have gone up, and they have, or rents have gone up, and they have. But what they're doing is they're taking, hundreds of markets and consolidating them. And, that's the number. So like anything, you have to unpack that and take a look at, which ones are really going up and which ones are not. And I think Boise is one of those markets that if you take a look, it's led the nation in migration, it's led the nation in job growth. But again, those numbers are based on what? Based on their current job count versus, new jobs. If you take a look at total numbers, they don't. And so, there's only so much you can do in those little markets, and Boise is a little market. I think that it's going to lead the way for something that's, going to correct pretty severely there.
Right. So I wanted to talk today about, because you feel like we're going into a renter nation, and that kind of is the consensus, what that kind of looks like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who wins? Who loses? Right. And so, what I found interesting is the media, of course, is spinning this whole renter nation as a great thing for tenants. I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, obviously I'm a landlord, and we have over 10,000 tenants. It's not. You have to. A balance is what we need. The real issue is, the rent should be a stepping stone for people that want to get into home ownership. I believe that.
Right. And then, but I just thought it was funny that the article, how the media is. So the article is kind of spinning this as it's a great thing for tenants long term. When we know that it's going to be a great thing for landlords long term. Well, they're saying, that housing is no longer a stable investment, which is interesting because it keeps going up. And then they're also saying that a nation of renters could lead to a world where location decisions are driven far more by personal preferences and life cycle demands. Young workers will prefer the excitement of the city, but then be able to rent somewhere when they have kids in a smaller town. So I just thought it was funny because, they make it sound like it's so glamorous being a tenant your whole life.
Well, I think if you go look at any of the statistics or any of the data, you'll see that the most of the people have most of their wealth in their home. And we all know that, like your parents do, my parents do. At the end of my mom's 90, and she has very little income, and she has a little pension from my dad, but she paid off her house, and that's where all her wealth is. I think that's very common. And so I find that very hard to believe because and yes, if you buy something high and it goes down, then of course, then you're going to be underwater on that, just like everyone was in 2008 and 2009. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants a home that's worth less than the mortgage, of course. But if you take a look at history, it has shown that the overwhelming majority of people's wealth and their stability at the end of their life has been in their home that they own.
Exactly. And I think it's just, the narrative that they're going to, start to push. Mr. Wright made a good point. He said in Tampa, the average rent is more than the average mortgage. And I'd like everyone listening's feedback. Like, what do you think about the media trying to skew that this renter nation is a great thing for tenants? I think it's a great thing for landlords, obviously, but I'm not seeing the benefit for the tenants. I just think that the media is trying to skew it that way.
The tenants have always had those options. That's why people rent. That's why I'm actually renting this house out of Manhattan Beach. It's very expensive, but I'm renting it here for the summer because I actually don't want to own. This house is probably $10 million. And, I don't want to own a $10 million home in California. I would rather just rent there for a month or two. So that they're right there where you get lots of options, and you have the ability to go where you want. Obviously, everybody knows I was just up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we were hanging out up there. I sold my house up there, and I rented up there also for this last summer as we try to figure out. And it does give us the flexibility. And I've owned homes all over the place. I've owned lots of different homes in different markets for summer homes and winter homes and primary homes. And it does allow you a lot of flexibility, but one thing it doesn't do is there's no tax advantages, and you're not getting the pay down on your debt, and you're not getting the appreciation in your home if you buy right. And not every market is screaming. In the Southeast, it's still pretty hot, like North Carolina, Florida, etc. But if you take a look, there are definitely markets that are declining.
Well, and it's interesting too, because that fixed rate mortgage, I feel like, is what, makes you able to retire, allows you to, I know my grandparents lived in a paid off home, and that, if they would have had a rent payment at today's rents, I mean, I don't know how much their Social Security would have covered of that.
Right. So, the comment that you made earlier was if the rents are cheaper than if the mortgages are cheaper than the rents, then that rental market potentially is going to be flat for a while, because
right.
It will make more sense for people to buy a home because they're trying to solve to that monthly payment if they have the down payment. They're trying to solve to that monthly payment.
Right, unless they just can't afford the house, and then
right.
They're all
wherever it is. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all pull out our bills. We all take a look at what we're paying for stuff, whether it's rent, mortgage, cars, food, whatever it is, and you're trying to solve to what you make, and so that's gonna drive a lot of people to a lot of places.
Well, and then Bill said something interesting. He said the media is pushing a global agenda. But what I do think is interesting about that is I was kind of looking up, how Europe and everyone handles all of these renters. And essentially they put in these rent controls. So the government is in charge of a lot of the housing. So how long do you think the average wait time is to get an apartment in Sweden?
I have no idea. How long?
9 years.
To get an affordable.
To get an apartment. If you're relying on the government to be able to find you an apartment, it's 9 years, 16 years if you want it in like a city center. And the government then gets to choose, the homeless get an apartment before you, or does this immigrant get an apartment before you. They're totally in charge of the whole thing. So I think it's funny, it's like when the government runs housing.
Yeah, well, they have before. I mean, you take a look at rent control, and listen, when the state of Oregon did rent control, I understand. Like, they're trying to keep things affordable, but what they're doing at the same time is they're basically saying, hey, we're going to cap your income, and then they're hitting them on the property tax increases on the expenses and other things. And so things are moving up on the expense side, and they're being capped on the income side. And what's going to happen is, people are not going to build there. People are not going to invest there. And so that's going to create a shortage. And, the things need to be in balance. There has to be housing enough to offset the demand. And it sometimes it's out of balance. Sometimes it's really short, and sometimes there's really too much. And so what people need to look at is exactly that. There are areas that are spiking from a price increase because there's not enough housing and there's too many people that want it. That's what happens.
Well, and that's really, we had talked to David Green on the podcast last week. I think it's getting aired next week. But he was saying, landlords are losing right now because of these rental moratoriums and all of the things. But in the end, the landlords are going to be the winners because people do need places to live. There's a shortage of housing. They're not developing housing right now because of the rising cost of development. And so, the media can try to spin it all they want, but the landlords are going to be the winners at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, we had a really nice chat with him. He's with Bigger Pockets. You guys should take a look at that if it's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. The real issue, and we've looked into this as a company. They're really right now. Think about this. There is no state in the United States that has affordable housing for for a big number of people. Not one. So we're now in the situation where we have just not even a year ago we were almost 7 million affordable units short. 7 million. So and rents now are somewhere around, the averages I think is somewhere between 1,400 and 1,500 a month, and home prices are now in the mid to high threes on the average. And so you start to take a look at all of this. You can see that the bow's going to break, and people are going to be forced into rentals. They're going to have to be forced into rentals, and the government is actually going to have to get involved. They're going to have to give either the tenant or the landlord money for the rent.
Right. Definitely. And just so we've had some questions on YouTube about where we're getting these media sources, and it was Bloomberg and The Atlantic.
Yeah, and guys, and there's a lot of really good stuff out there. If you take a look at the National Multi-Housing Council, the National Apartment Association, the Independent Renters Housing, the IRH, there's a lot of really good data out there around what how many renters there are. Right now, there's about 33% of the nation are renters. So call it 67% are homeowners. Now, I'm sure you can find that maybe it's 32, maybe it's 34 or something, at different websites. But the point is, it's roughly a third renters and 2/3 homeowners. And what I'm saying is that it very well could push into close to 40% renters over the next 10 years. And that would be a massive change. And that's going to put a lot more demand on rental housing. It's going to drive rents up in areas where there's not enough supply.
Yeah, and if you guys want to know more on the rising rents, you can go to kenmcelroy.com/rising rents. Ken and I put together a really good handout for both tenants and landlords on how to navigate this.
But the one
And
thing
then,
that I want
Mr.
to, yep, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, the one thing I want to point out is it's not as easy as just adding more units. I think that if it was, everyone would do that. And so we've already been behind by about 250,000 houses a year for the last 20 years. So we're 4 or 5 million housing units behind already. And as you guys know, now we have each of these cities. When you try to build in a city, it's expensive. Different cities charge different prices to be able to build for the right to build. So you think about all the components. You have the land, which is really expensive right now. Then you have what they call the impact fees, which is what the building says, okay, the city says you can plug into our sewer, you can plug into our electric and our water and all that. Those are called impact fees. Those are paid to the city. Those fees vary greatly. So Portland is different than Seattle, and LA is different than Portland. And so you start to look at all the things before you even break ground, before you buy the land, and just to that point. Then now you have all these construction costs that are going up and labor costs that are going up. All of those have to be calculated into the price of one housing unit. And so if that is really, really expensive, then of course the builder can't afford to build. So there has to be it's just not as easy as going and adding a bunch of houses.
Exactly. And Tommy wanted to know if you have any thoughts on advances in technology and how they could impact housing development costs.
So this is I actually have friends that are in this space, and they've been racking their brain, honestly. The 3D houses, are kind of that people have been talking a lot about those, but those still are not that affordable. That's what we've seen so far. I've had people try to do these systems off-site with big warehouses and put it all in these modular wall systems, and I actually think that something that you might want to consider taking a look at would be maybe the lifting of some of these zoning issues and allowing some of these tiny home communities, because because the reason, so you think about a tiny home, call it 300 to 400 square feet, and it's obviously very, very, very small, but it has everything that you need. But you can't just put those anywhere. Like the city of Scottsdale, the city of Phoenix just won't allow it. You can't buy a piece of land and drop those on. There are zoning requirements, let's say one house per acre or one house per half acre. So there are things that the city requires that constrict the amount of housing you could put in a particular area. And those are in place for a reason. And I'm not trying to say they shouldn't be in place, but if they have to release some of these zoning restrictions to be able to allow more housing in areas, and the cities are going to have to work with some of these developers to be able to deliver housing, the number of housing, because something has to be done in the next 10 years. It's going to be very, very interesting. Otherwise, we are going to move to, I don't think we've ever been over 40% with renters to homeowners. So homeownership could dip down into the 60%, even into the 50s for the first time ever.
Yep, definitely. So, well, I want to jump over to the premium questions. Make sure you hit the like button, you guys. It really helps us out. We put these together every week. And then sign up for the premium group where you can ask Ken questions directly. So Erica wanted to know from premium, if a partnership is 50-50 and her husband is a general contractor, how should she pay him for his labor in the renovation without digging too deep into the 50%?
Okay, so I'm not exactly clear on the question, but I'll answer how I would structure a deal like that. So the way that we do partnerships and ownership is one thing, and the way that we build and develop is another. So I'm going to talk about them completely separately. So the right way to do a general contractor with somebody who has a general contractor's license is to pay them market value. So whatever that is. And so, for us, we get a fixed fee. If we hired another contractor, it would be the exact same fee. So, we don't discount ours and we don't mark ours up. So it's the same way in the property management world. So when we manage our properties, if we didn't have a management company, we would be paying the exact same fee. So that's the right way to take a look at a general contractor's fee. Now, that really has nothing to do with the ownership. So because that's a service, the only difference is that your husband's doing it. So if he's licensed and all that, there should not be any kind of differentiation. You just pay whatever's market. And then because let's say you had to terminate your husband for some reason, or something happened, he got too busy or whatever, and you had to bring someone else in. You just replace them for what the market is, and it would not affect your ownership split. The ownership split is very, very, very different. It should have nothing to do with who the contractor is.
Okay. So then Rickard also wants to know, when looking at depreciation and write-offs, is there a case where you lower the cash flow to match the amount of the write-off to help you save taxes?
So the way depreciation works is it's nothing that I can actually manipulate. So for the IRS basically tells you what your depreciation is. And for multifamily, for example, it's 27 and a half years. So you have to subtract the land because the land's not depreciable, and you can depreciate everything else 27 and a half years. That's a fixed number. There's nothing I can do about that. So, once the CPAs and everyone figures out what that number is, it is what it is. It's nothing that I can change or move. It's based on the actual structure. So, of course, the structure doesn't change year over year. So it is what it is through the life of the partnership. On a cost segregation, you actually have to do, which is another part of a way to save tax, which is basically taking the components of the things in real estate. So think about the flooring, the appliances, those kinds of things. And you can actually depreciate those much quicker. And those do require typically a cost segregation study by an independent CPA. And so they'll come in and say, this is what we think all those are worth. And then you have that document to be able to back that up in the event you ever get audited. So it has, and then whatever the property cash flows to his, which was one part of his question, it cash flows. And what you're trying to do is have either your depreciation expense and or your cost segregation expense, which is to offset that cash flow so that you can get a tax, tax deferred income, or, so you can actually get the cash flow and not pay tax. And so you're always trying to manage that. We call it a non-operational expense to offset your cash flow, because you can do that legally, but you have to really, really follow the, obviously the IRS, and there are a lot of I's that you must dot and T's you have to cross before you go into that.
Yeah, you don't want to just do it illegally. Jin
No.
On YouTube had a follow-up question from that, and from the first question. He said, what's the course of action if the partner doesn't want to cover 50% of an expense?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So inside of the operating agreement, there should be a piece on partnership cash calls. So we've had to do this before back in the mid 2000s, where Ross and I actually had to write a check to cover properties because, we bought and then we had to carry them through this 07, 08 pop. And there are partners that don't have the money or don't want to give you the money or whatever. So there should be language in there for dilution, and it's really crystal clear, and there's nothing they can do. And so I've had to do it before, but basically here's how it works. Everybody puts their money in. Let's say there's a cash call for $100,000, and let's say you put your 50 in, and your other partner doesn't put your 50 in. You can actually dilute them and you can actually cover that if you need their piece, if you have it, or you could put yours in for a cash call and actually dilute their ownership interest. And it's all up inside of that operating agreement. And so you need to pull that out, take a look at how cash calls work. And there are other ways to do it too. You can actually loan the partnership instead of doing a partnership cash call and dilution. So there are other ways to get money into a partnership. So you should always look into that too if if you don't want to go down that road.
So the next question comes from Jason. He said, at what point will the bank stop requiring you to have a personal guarantee on a loan for commercial?
So I don't sign personal guarantees for any of my loans, and except for
Well, you do for construction. Yeah.
For construction. Yeah. So so personal guarantees are risky, obviously, and they extend to you personally. That's kind of the whole point. So there are plenty of lenders out there that do what they call non-recourse debt. So you have to go find those people. Most do not. So it's obviously a smaller pool of lenders, but there are plenty of them. And what you will have to show is that you have some kind of an asset to be able to cover that loan. So that might be the real estate, it might be something else, but you got to really be careful in this arena. This is what takes down people. This is what takes down people that are 10, 20 years in the business, especially on the new construction side. If you take a look in the 80s and the 90s, and I have tons of friends that went through this, where they think they're so smart, and they're getting these 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollar construction loans, and all of a sudden the market stops and they're sitting on 100 to 200 million dollars worth of construction debt, and there's no buyers, and all of a sudden the whole house of cards starts to collapse. And so the personal guarantee is probably the biggest concern that a real estate investor should keep in mind and top of mind, because you want to really, really be careful on getting anything that's personally guaranteed. And there's plenty out there. Trust me, you just got to find them. And I would suggest that you put it out on some of your social media, put it out on on obviously the resources that you have in your market, but they're definitely out there.
Yeah, and I want to say, Robert says thank you for doing this, and you guys, we totally love to do this. Ken really likes to help educate you on real estate. If you could just help us out and hit the like button, that would be awesome. So our next question comes from Darren. He said he's determined he needs to acquire real estate for business purposes, and he has to hang his license with a licensed broker. And he basically wants to know how he does that, if he just wants to use it for his own investment properties.
So it's actually quite simple. For those of you guys might know, there is a reason to have a broker. Brokers typically are more experienced. They're people that have been in the business a long time. And typically, in most states that I know, I think probably every state, you have to have a salesperson has to hang their license underneath a broker. But I do know that there are some very low cost options. So I know that you can hang your license for $100 to 200, call it $300 a month, and have access to all kinds of information on the MLS. And I think that and then you're protected underneath that broker. And I think that you have to take a look at, there's plenty of brokers out there that'll work that deal for you. And, I think maybe you're concerned about them taking a piece of your commission. And I think you just got to take a look at, there's a fair amount of brokers out there that'll just do it for a monthly fee and let you basically keep what you have to keep. When I did a big condominium project in Las Vegas, I hired a local broker because I didn't have a Nevada broker's license. And I hired a bunch of salespeople to work for him, and he took a flat fee per closing. And and we were done with it. So there's a lot of ways to do it. One way to do it there's a lot of inactive brokers, a lot. So like, I don't know, last I looked, in California and Washington and in Nevada, there were thousands of inactives. So think about somebody that maybe had their broker's license and retired. All you got to do is contact them and say, could you activate your license? And, could I hang mine under? Now, they do have liability and they do have to check your paperwork and all that kind of stuff, but there are lots of ways to work around or work with the system so that you're not losing a big part of your commission.
Yeah, and I want to call out, we have a little bit of hate coming from the renters on YouTube. So I want to kind of address that. They're saying, we're getting screwed and everything else. But what I would like to say to them, and Ken, I'd be interested in your thoughts, is don't hate the system. You have to get into the system, right? At least there's the opportunity to get into the system. And instead of being mad about it, you really should focus on how you can get into the system and become, part of somebody that can rent out a property.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for them. I do. But they need to figure it out. I mean, there are plenty of people out there getting educated to try to figure out how to not be renters. A lot of people, and
Yep.
you can absolutely be one of those people. So I don't know your personal situation or your personal circumstance. If you don't want to rent, figure out a plan for you not to rent. That's what I did. I mean, that's what Danille did. That's what most, a lot of the real estate investors do. And that's kind of the whole point, actually, is to rent if you want to rent, not because you have to rent.
Exactly. And, you really can do it. And, if you're just upset with the system, you just got to flip your mindset and say, you know what, instead of being upset about it, I need to figure out how to get into the system. And that's kind of what we all did. And it's worth it.
I do understand, that there's, some anger there, but, I don't know what are they waiting for somebody to bail them out somehow? Maybe that might be on the way.
Yeah, an income series said you have to just learn the system and play it. No use in kicking against bricks. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to say it. But you can get upset about it and you'll be upset about it your whole life, or you can change your mindset and get into the system and benefit from it.
I do appreciate the feedback. It's not all happy camp around here. We do need to be able to discuss that issue, and people that are upset should be able to voice their opinion about it. I will tell you, from somebody who started renting, who somebody did not come from any type of wealth whatsoever, that you can do it just with education.
Yep, exactly. So we're going to do one more question. So Sean says he has equity in a property and he's wondering how to move forward. And some of you on YouTube have asked this too. Does he pay, does he do a cash out refi and sit on the cash? Does he pay off his mortgage? Does he, use that cash to buy, rent, and rehab another place? What do you recommend?
So every single time we have a lot of equity in our property, the first thing that we look at is how much of a loan are we comfortable with? That's the first thing. So in a lot of cases for us, at this point in my career, it's right around 60 to 65% leverage. That's it, depending on the property. So you have to first wrap your head around that. And because obviously higher leverage means a higher payment. But it also means higher cash out. So you have to take a look at what your mortgage is versus what your income is, and then you have to kind of do your own math and whatever makes you feel comfortable. So let's say you have 50% equity as an example, and you have a variable rate loan. That's a no-brainer. That's something that you're going to go maybe put 70% on with a lower fixed rate payment, and then scoop that cash. And what you do with that cash, you want to obviously is another topic, reinvest it somehow. But what you really want to make sure of is that new loan is it going to cash flow still for you? You want to make sure that if your tenant moves out, you know, and you have the thing vacant for 3 months, that you're not scrambling, let's say, to try to fill it back up, and you've got that, you know, that stress of having to pay that each and every month. So you want plenty of cash flow, and so it's always a fine balance. And I'm a fan. I never believe that the market's going to be higher next year, ever. I'm more of a pessimist around that. And so I always solve to what it is today. And I always think about what happens if occupancy goes down and rents go down. Even though I don't, this topic and this podcast and this live here is really about rents going up, I'm always a little more pessimistic around that. In other words, I'm not the optimist. The rents are going to go up 10%. Housing prices are going to go up a lot, and I'm going to be fine. That's not how I think. I do the opposite.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Manuel, his comment, just stop being poor, quoted by Ken McElroy. We might do a video on that coming up. That sounds like a good video idea. But we'll see you guys next week. If you haven't hit the like button, then damn it, just hit the like button, and we'll see you next Monday.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I always like doing these a lot, so I appreciate your time.